Another big storm will be impacting the United States over the next few days, and this will bring more significant severe weather for much of the United States, where significant damaging winds, large to very large hail, and multiple tornadoes will be possible. This all kicks off today and will run all the way through Thursday. So in today's forecast, we are going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next several days, and we'll begin with what's happening across the country today. And we are coming off of a quote-unquote severe weather event that happened yesterday. It never ended up turning into a severe weather outbreak. In fact, we barely had any tornadoes yesterday, anywhere in the Midwest and back into the southern plains. It was a fairly conditional risk of severe weather. It really depended on storm initiation, which we had storms initiate, but they were not in the right places for there to be the potential for long-tracked and strong tornadoes, which overall is very good news. Thank goodness we did not have more tornadoes, but unfortunately we did have one strong tornado just south of Eau Claire, Wisconsin last night that did produce some significant damage. We actually had multiple tornadoes with that storm system, but generally speaking, we still have plenty of showers and thunderstorms out there right now, and we are expecting another round of severe weather today, one of which will be back over in the Ohio Valley in the Northeast, and then another one that'll be ongoing back over in the southern plains and back towards the Mississippi River Valley, and this will continue as we go into Wednesday and Thursday. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential over the next few days, and we'll begin with today, which we have a huge area that we are talking about for scattered to numerous severe weather throughout the afternoon and evening hours, stretching from the northeast all the way back into the southern plains. Now, today's severe weather setup is vastly different from yesterday. We actually have two different storm systems that are going to create the potential for severe weather, one of which is moving across the Midwest. This is the storm system that was meant to bring severe weather yesterday. It brought some, but didn't bring the scale of severe weather that we anticipated. But we have another risk of severe weather here for damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes that'll come out of this low pressure system. I do want to point out that our low level jet will be relatively strong across the Ohio Valley and Northeast today, which should allow for a slightly more elevated tornado threat, especially in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York, mainly during the afternoon hours. Further down to the south, we have a different storm system that is going to be forming back over in the Four Corners states, and this will help to bring another risk of severe weather back over in the southern plains, where additional damaging winds, large to very large hail, and a few tornadoes will all be possible. So the main concerns for today are expected to be damaging winds and large hail. Our wind outlook is a lot more elevated if you're back over in Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and as well as New York, where there is a 30% chance within a 25-mile radius of damaging winds between 60 to 70 miles per hour. Also notice if you're back over in Oklahoma and north central Texas, there's also a potential for damaging winds between 70 to 80 miles per hour this afternoon. So make sure that you're hatching down trampolines and protecting loose lawn items across this region. There's also a threat of significant hail, especially if you're back over in Texas, Oklahoma, or even just south of Springfield, Missouri, where hailstone sizes could be as high as the size of baseballs. Might even see a couple of storms produce up to softball-sized hail this afternoon, and that'll mainly be between Wichita Falls, Texas, back through around the Midland area, just kind of north of Midland, east of Amarillo. That's where I think our greatest threat for very large hail will exist. And our tornado threat, as kind of expected, now includes a very large area. Here's the thing. The tornado threat across the board is still on the low side of things. We have a 2% tornado risk, literally from Texas all the way back up into New York. You don't usually see this. We also have two 5% tornado risks, which is where we'll have a slightly more elevated potential for a few tornadoes this afternoon and evening across parts of New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and then another one back over in Oklahoma and Texas. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up getting a 10% hatch tornado risk if trends continue in the wrong direction later today. So definitely something to keep a close eye on. But either way, I still would not rule out an isolated strong tornado if they do or don't upgrade the risk for tornadoes today. And then as we go into Wednesday, our risk of severe weather will be shifting more to the south, where our next low pressure system will be moving from the southwest, bringing an additional risk of severe weather. And our greatest potential for severe weather will be across Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma, where there is currently a level 2 out of 5 severe weather risk. That is a slight risk of severe weather. I do think that there's a chance that this gets upgraded to an enhanced risk of severe weather if trends continue in the wrong direction, mainly in southeastern Oklahoma and also across North Texas, where there could be a more elevated hail, wind, and tornado risk all in play across this region. We also have a level 1 out of 5 marginal threat of severe weather that goes from the Ohio Valley back into Texas, where there will be some isolated damaging winds, hail, and maybe an isolated tornado. So our wind risk right now is going to be one of the greater concerns for Wednesday across Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Our hail risk is not super elevated. We're not really talking about that many very large hailstorms. I think generally speaking on Wednesday, we are not talking about softball plus sized hail like what we've been dealing with over the last few weeks, but there is still a chance for some large hail up to the size of about 2 inches in diameter. Our tornado risk is a little bit more elevated for those in southeastern Oklahoma, all around Dallas, Fort Worth, and all across North Texas, really, and also into western Arkansas, where a few tornadoes do appear possible at this time, and an isolated tornado or two cannot be ruled out in this little 2% tornado risk, which also includes most of Arkansas, parts of Oklahoma, and also back over into central Texas. Today's tornado risk will not be nearly as favorable as what we had yesterday, but we are expecting the continuation of at least a few tornadoes this afternoon and into the early evening across parts of the Ohio Valley and Northeast. Our significant tornado parameter values are nowhere near what we had yesterday back over in the Midwest. We had values upwards of 8 to 10. In this case, we only have values around 1, 2, and a few 3s in there, which should at least indicate that we are going to see a few tornadoes, especially with how many storms we are expecting to fire off today. You might be wondering, are we going to have less tornadoes than yesterday because our values are much lower? That is not what that means. And actually, in this case, we're going to have a lot more storms basically guaranteed across this region. So I do think a few tornadoes are in the cards today across parts of the Northeast and back into the Ohio Valley, mainly during the mid to late afternoon and as well as the early evening. And then by the time these storms try to get to the East Coast, they should be falling apart by then. So I think our tornado threat will be the greatest sometime around 2 to about 6 o'clock here across New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and even back through parts of Kentucky. And then our tornado risk back over in the southern plains is a little bit different. So throughout the day today, we are expecting a boundary where we will have the potential for a few tornadoes. And honestly, a strong tornado, in my opinion, is not impossible back over in southwest Oklahoma and also back over into central Texas, where our environment is going to be still favorable for tornadoes, possibly even an isolated strong tornado this afternoon and into the early evening. By around 7 to 8 o'clock, any tornado threat would be shifting further to the east. If we have any storm still ongoing back over here just west of Dallas, Fort Worth, there could still be an isolated tornado threat, but I do think our greatest period of tornadoes would probably be sometime between about 3 o'clock all the way up until about 8 o'clock this evening. And then otherwise, large hail and damaging winds will really dominate the day here across the southern plains. And then once we go into Wednesday, we're going to talk more about this here in a second, but on Wednesday, we are expecting at least a few rounds of storms to be ongoing throughout the morning. And if the environment can become unstable during the afternoon, I honestly wouldn't rule out at least a few tornadoes being possible in parts of North Texas and southeastern Oklahoma. And honestly, wouldn't even rule out a strong tornado once again in this environment, as our low-level jet will really start to increase as we go into the mid to late afternoon and early evening hours. So there's really 2 days to be watching for here if you are in the southern plains, both today and tomorrow, where significant severe weather is a possibility. So here's the timing for severe weather today. We are going to go from the northeast back through the southern plains, beginning with around 2 o'clock this afternoon. That's when I expect at least some storms to initiate back over in Ohio, right near Lake Erie, also right around Buffalo, New York, where damaging winds and hail will be the main concerns initially. But I do think our greatest tornado threat, if we end up having a bit more of a significant one, would mainly be from about 2 to 3 p.m. all the way up until about 6 to 7 p.m. out of any discrete or semi-discrete supercells that are ongoing, mainly in this corridor here. Eventually, by the time we get closer to 5 to 6 o'clock, these storms are continuing to push to the east. I think our tornado threat will really be the greatest in about a 3 to 4 hour window. So by around 6 o'clock, which is what's pictured here, I think we're going to have more of a line of thunderstorms across the board across New York. Could have a couple of clusters still ongoing back over in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and then another cluster likely back over in Kentucky and southern Ohio. Damaging winds the main concern with this, maybe an isolated tornado or two still being a possibility. And then by 7 to 8 o'clock, these storms are continuing to push east, where there will still be some isolated damaging winds and hail, but our tornado risk will be much lower. And generally speaking, these storms will be falling apart as they move into New England and also approaching the East Coast. And then it fizzles out as we go into Wednesday. Now, back over in the Ohio Valley, we are expecting some storms out there. They're already out there this morning, by the way. There are a few rumbles of thunder back over in Missouri. This will continue into the afternoon and upscaling more into just a disorganized cluster of showers and thunderstorms spanning from Arkansas back up into Indiana, with scattered severe weather being a possibility here. Damaging winds and hail are the main concerns, but if any storm in this area can get a little bit more organized, I wouldn't rule out an isolated tornado. The best chance for that to happen would be sometime around 3 to about 6 o'clock in this particular region, and then eventually by 8 to 9 o'clock, as these storms go towards the Appalachian Mountains, they will be falling apart as they get closer to Virginia and North Carolina. Now, if you're back over in the southern plains, very different story. Our severe weather risk is not really going to ramp up until later this afternoon, even though we will have at least some showers and thunderstorms out there during the morning. Eventually, by around 3 to 4 o'clock is when we expect storm initiation across parts of central Texas, where our initial supercells will fire. And I do think our greatest risk out of these storms initially will be large to very large hail, damaging winds, and even maybe an isolated tornado or two before this threat really starts to upscale by 4 to 5 o'clock. We are going to have a bunch of different storms out there. Most of these are, again, hail and wind producers, but we should at least see a couple of tornadoes out of this activity, maybe a strong tornado as well, with our wind shear being a little bit more strong in this region. By around 6 to 7 o'clock, these storms continue, and it's going to be pretty messy, I think, by 7 to 8 o'clock. A lot of storms out there. We might even see a mesoscale convective system try to form as well out of these storms, which means that we could see a line of thunderstorms that will continue to produce damaging winds and a low tornado risk even into the evening hours, before eventually this becomes pretty disorganized as we go into the overnight hours. The HRRR also has more storms firing off around and just after midnight back over in central Texas and also in the Texas Panhandle, and if this happens, it would be mainly a hail risk out of these storms. These should be more elevated. Tornado risk would be much lower by this point, and then eventually as we go into Wednesday, guess what? That line of storms will try to continue here across Oklahoma and Arkansas before eventually an uptick of severe weather is likely as we go into Wednesday afternoon. Back over in North Texas near the Red River Valley, where additional large hail, damaging winds, and a few tornadoes are all going to be a possibility. But honestly, Wednesday depends a lot on what's going to be happening today. So once we know a better idea of what's going to be happening later this afternoon and evening, we should have a much better idea of what's going to be happening on Wednesday in North Texas and also southeastern Oklahoma. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon down below so you're notified with the latest updates, as we will have another video more than likely tomorrow morning talking more about the threat of severe weather on Wednesday and as well as Thursday. So as we go into the future, by late Wednesday into Thursday, that low pressure system will get a little bit more organized back over in the Central Plains, and that'll eventually move into the Midwest on Thursday. We should see another round of at least some scattered severe weather back over in parts of the Ohio Valley and the Dixie Alley on Thursday, with damaging winds, some hail, and maybe even a few tornadoes again being a possibility. And then some better news. By the time we go into Friday, I do think our risk of severe weather will start to become a lot lower. I still think there's a chance of severe weather in the Southern Plains on Friday from some mesoscale madness, maybe even into Saturday, but eventually by Sunday into Monday, we have a high pressure system dominating a large chunk of the United States, which should keep our weather at least a little bit quieter for a day or two. But keep in mind, we're going into May and severe weather is still going to stay active. So by the early to mid portion of next week, really the next thing that we'll have to watch for is going to be over in the Great Plains, where a low pressure system will try to move over the Rockies. And if it can successfully move over the Rockies, there is going to be a potential for maybe a bit more of an elevated risk of severe weather. But as of right now, it's too early to tell what's going to be happening next week. Let's get through the next few days. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, we'll be live later today covering severe weather from the Northeast back into the Southern Plains. And also make sure to click the bell icon so you're notified when we do go live.